Hi everyone, this is Sharon, and once again I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel, Real Gals Fish. Now in this info vid, we're going to take a look at floats, or aka bobbers. What's the purpose of a float or a bobber? Well, it helps suspend your bait in the water, especially if you're fishing for fish like bluegills or crappie that are school fish that like to sit suspended in the water. This is where you need to suspend your bait at a certain depth rather than sitting it on the bottom. They also help keep your hook and bait off of the bottom where it could be snaggy or craggy. They're really good for visibility, so you can see where your line is. They're good to indicate fish strikes, and also they're simply just a lot of fun to watch while you're fishing. Now floats come in different types of materials and different shapes. They can be made of plastic, they can be made of styrofoam, and they can be made of balsa wood. The rounder the float, the more buoyancy you have. And of course, the longer, skinnier the float, the less buoyancy you have. So let's take a look at two types of floats I have here. These ones here are called spring floats. And they get their name by simply the spring that's on the bottom. And they have like a hook there, which you hook onto your line, spring holds it, and then they simply sit in the water until a fish strike. And when the fish strike comes along, they pop up this way. And notice this one has a mast and this one's a little rounder. This one, the rounder one, is more is used for if you're using a little heavier bait. It's more for buoyancy, but it works the same way. It'll float in the water until there's a fish strike, when it will sit up in the water. The mast on this one allows for greater visibility, especially if you're drift fishing. So your line's floating in the current, and you'll see it better with the mast than you would probably if it was floating in the current with the rounder float. So that's why you have round floats and the long pencil-like floats, or floats with a mast on. Mast is more for visibility, though it will hold your bait up off the bottom. This is more for floating your bait, heavier bait, because there's more buoyancy to a rounder shaped float. So those are spring floats. You simply just hook them on by pulling the spring back. Now another type of float is this one here, this round float. This is a very popular one. This is probably the more accessible float that you can ever get your hands on, this one here. Simply you hook it onto your line at the top here, on this hook here, and then again on the bottom here. And it sits on the line like an inline float and simply bobs up and down. And just remember, the rounder, the bigger the float is, the rounder it is, the bigger diameter it is, the more resistance you're going to have for the fish. So if you're using ultralight equipment, you're not going to use a huge round float. I see a lot of people with the big round floats like this, and they're using ultralight equipment. It makes it very difficult for the fish to pull the line. All right, so you want to stay to a small. If you're using light lines, you're going to stay to the light tackle. You're going to stay to something around this size. Okay, so that's your ball float. Another float which is very similar to a ball float, it fixes on the line the same way as a cigar float. This is made of styrofoam. It has a weighted end. They come weighted or not weighted. Again, you're going to put your line in the hook here, and then in the hook at the bottom. There's the hook at the bottom, and it sits on your line and will bob up and down on a fish strike. That's made of styrofoam. Now, one of the problems you have with floats, of course, is casting. It's very difficult to cast if you have your float set up and you've got 3 feet of line hanging below the float. So what do? Well, this is what where this baby comes in. This is called a SlipBobber, and it simply is threaded onto the main line through that hole there, comes out the end here. You attach a hook and maybe your BB shot. Then at the top here, you're going to have a stop bobber and a bead. Stop bobber can either be a piece of plastic band or one of these little cotton pieces here. You slip it onto the line, and then you have first of all your bead, then your stop bobber, and you can literally pull this piece of cotton or your stop bobber up and down the line so you can set the depth for your line to flow through until it gets to the stop bobber. And then it simply floats in the water like this. Your line hangs out from through here. When you reel it in, the line is pulled back in through the float and you simply have your float. Just makes it a lot easier to cast when you're using a SlipBobber. So, what are the cost of floats? Well, they can range from fairly inexpensive to fairly expensive. SlipBobbers are usually made of balsa wood, as is the spring floats. So they usually are a little bit more expensive than your plastic and your styrofoam. SlipBobbers, I've seen them go, one bobber go for up to $15 for one bobber. From $2 or $3 up to $15. These particular ones, you can buy them in packages for of 10 different sizes for maybe $2 or $3. These ones, again, get a package of 6 for about $3. All depends what you want. Just remember, if you've got the round floats, there's more resistance on the line when the fish is tugging on it than there is on the skinny floats, okay? And again, if you're getting something with has a long mast on it, that's for your visibility. If you're drift fishing, that's fishing in a current so that you can actually see your float. Now you can also get floats that are used at night. These ones are either bright fluorescent colors or they actually glow so that you can see your line where it is when you're fishing at night. So there's floats for all occasions, and it doesn't matter what type of fish it is. All fish can be caught on a float system, whether it's a panfish all the way up to shark can be caught on float systems. A lot of people have the attitude that a float rig is more for kids. No, it's not. Any level of fishing can be utilize a float system. So, you know, it's not just for kids, it's for any level of fishing. So that's basically your floats and their uses. So, and the styles that you'll see. Again, you can buy them in any tackle store, even your hardware stores. They're very easy to get hold of. So that's your fishing float, okay? So thanks for watching. This is Sharon for Real Gals Fish. Until the next time, tight lines.
Well, y'all come back now, you hear?